welcome everyone. It's lovely to see so many of you in person, and welcome to those joining online. I think we've got a few hundred of you online, so welcome also. This is a hybrid event, so there will be some of you in the room, some of you online. There'll be speakers in the room, and there'll be speakers joining online as well. So we're trying to make the best of both worlds. For those of you that want to engage, and that's in the room and online, you can download Slido. There is a QR code that you can find on the event page to do that. So please do scan the QR code. You can sign up for Slido, and that allows you to ask questions and also take part in some polls will be happening during the event. So please get involved in Slido. Welcome everyone. My name's Hannah Kitcherside. I'm Associate Director at Turner & Townsend in our Programme Advisory team. So really, I'm going to be your chairperson, host, MC for this afternoon. And to be honest with you, it's great to be at an event where we're talking about sustainability in construction and in an industry which definitely needs to have this conversation a lot more often, and not just the conversation, but to actually the action to do something about it. I'm really pleased that we have such a great array of really high profile speakers here. They'll be covering a range of different topics, from specific things that we can be doing in innovation in construction on sites and kind of delivering kind of materials and the way that we build, to actually thinking about the wider industry picture. So what do we need to do to make that reality? What capability do we need? How fast do we need innovation to happen? Because at the moment, it's probably not fast enough. And then also, how do we make it happen? Should it be government-led? Should it be kind of private developer-led? And how can organizations that we work for and that we're involved with get involved in that conversation? So, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our keynote speaker. This is David Weissel. He is the Infrastructure Managing Director at Turner & Townsend, and he is going to give us an overview on his take of the industry as we see it in sustainability, and what we can be doing more of. So, thank you, and I'll hand over to David.
Good to see some real people in a real room. Am I okay with this mic? Yeah, cool, thank you. It's great to see everyone, isn't it? It's been a while since I've been actually in front of people talking. It's all a bit surreal, but great to see some people in the room and people, of course, online. Thanks, Hannah. So yeah, I'm the Managing Director of Turner & Townsend's infrastructure business. That's all things transportation, utilities, power and defence. I also co-chair a thing called Constructive Excellence. It's all about working industry to drive improvement. I'm not a carbon expert. I'm not a sustainability expert, but I'm passionate about it. And if we're not passionate about it in this room, we're in the wrong place. We're in the wrong industry. We really are. Look, I'm going to canter kind of quite keynote speech. I'm thinking, oh my God, you're building up here. I think I'm here to get us going, get us thinking about it, and then the real experts will talk to more detail of things. But there we go. Why am I here to talk about it? Well, as I said, I'm not an expert. They are miners, coal miners. I grew up in Derbyshire, full of coal mines. My granddad, his dad, and probably his dad were all coal miners, and they're all men. Why am I explaining that? Or maybe there's a bit of inside me. I'm thinking, God, there's some moral obligation there to do something sustainable and clean energy, perhaps. But actually, Derbyshire transformed itself. It moved from coal mines to now being the biggest employer, to now Rolls-Royce being the biggest employer in Derbyshire. Who actually are all about clean energy moving forward and doing some fantastic things. So it shows you actually an area, an industry can transform itself, can move forward. I thought that was a good introduction to myself and also to perhaps what we're going to talk about. In terms of climate change, it's undeniable. You hopefully all have read about it. You've seen reports from in August from the UN about the implications of climate change. It is undeniable. We know that you've seen the news this morning. Boris Johnson in New York talking about it. Humanity is at a turning point, has to act. We need to grow up. Absolutely agree with it. The evidence is there. Last year again was the second hottest year, I think, on record. 410 million homes will be underwater soon if we don't do something about it, and we've got a window to sort this out. Our industry generates at least 60% of global emissions. I've said at least, I think it's probably more than that. My world transportation says 23%, but actually a lot of that is the use of transport rather than actually the embodied and construction that goes into actually building the transport in the first place. And then 38% relates to buildings, a built environment, both residential, buildings like this, and that splits down again. There's emissions, the carbon emissions that are embodied. That's all about actually the carbon that comes from actually the construction process, the materials we use in the construction process at the end of the life cycle of the asset as well, the building. And then there's carbon more operational that comes from the building and its use. And that could be directly generated through how the building's used. It could be from actually getting things like electricity into the building in the first place. We've got to get our head around the fact that this industry generates the vast proportion of carbon that plays right into climate change. It's down to us to do something about it. It really is. What can we do about it? I say we're going to hear, I think, more later about the specifics and ideas and thoughts and innovation we can do, as Hannah touched on. But I just thought I'd share some kind of macro things that, as an industry, we can do. But perhaps also, secondly, people in this room can also help with. So our industry, right at the heart, we've got to re-engineer it. I've been in this industry now for 19 years, and we keep talking about transformation, changing it, improving it. My goodness, I get bored of it because we're not going fast enough. We have to do it now. This is our window to do it. We've got to utilise carbon and climate change as the absolute catalyst to do it. How do we do it? We've got a broken industry, firstly. We know it's not particularly profitable for many organisations. We know there's a skills crisis. We've got the right talent into it. It's not branded very well. It's seen as dirty. We've got to change all that together. Talent, that's where it starts. We have to attract and retain the best talent we can into industry. And what an amazing opportunity we've got. We generate 60% of the carbon globally, but actually, we're the people going to save this planet going forward. If we do our jobs right, we'll absolutely, next decade, come through this as the rock stars, the movie stars, won't we? We'll be the people that absolutely save the day. It's up to us to do it, people in this room. What an opportunity to absolutely use that to attract talent into our industry and retain them into it going forward. But we need the brightest brains, the passion into industry to do something about it. And we're losing too many people who are going to join construction, the wider built environment, and leaving industries. Secondly, bottom left-hand corner, whole life. We've built our industry to think about capital projects and building stuff. We don't tend to think about whole life, actually how we think about systems in the world of infrastructure, what I do. We think about the whole life of assets and how we should be using. We think about, do we need to build in the first place, actually, or the technology solutions to get the right outcome rather than just building stuff all the time. 85% of the assets that will be here in 2050 are already here. So what we're going to do is actually absolutely retrofit them. Have we got the capability, the skills to retrofit? Are we thinking about retrofit, how we go about it, how we fund it? Probably not as fast as we need to. Bottom right hand corner, program management. We talk a lot about program management. We've got to think in a programmatic way about how we tackle industry, how we work with industry, how we bring a net zero thinking into the heart of big projects and programs as the first thing we think about, the core that we think about every day. But also a lot of our clients want help forming net zero programs, looking across all their assets, their real estate assets, the portfolios, to think about how they drive decarbonisation. On the right-hand side, innovation. I think we're going to hear more about innovation later from some of the speakers. But, again, we talk about offsite, we talk about modern methods of construction, we talk about lots of innovation, but we're just not enabling it. We've got to use this opportunity now to enable it. How do we build local supply chains that actually have the capability to work with us and bring innovation that will play to decarbonisation going forward? And so that's the industry, kind of macro themes there, but what can you do about it? What can you do in this room to actually help? Well, first I'd say don't underestimate what you can achieve. Do not, you will be the generation, and I was looking at behind me here, being quite old, so it's Construction Zero youth event. I don't know I'm a youth anymore. But you are the now generation. Don't classify yourself as a youth generation. You are the now generation. You've got to absolutely stick your head above the parapet in your design team meetings, in your project meetings, challenge your organisations. What are you doing on decarbonisation? Stand up, challenge engineers who have been here for 20 years, 30 years, the project managers, challenge them. Put that challenge in. They'll listen to you. Be passionate about it. Be relentless about it. You can absolutely be the ambassadors for change. Go back to the talent bit. Help us attract people to this industry. Go and be ambassadors. Get to schools, educate colleges, bring people to this industry. Tell them about actually the job we've got to do, the passion we can have, the thing we can have, the thing we can do to actually transform this industry, and with that have a massive positive impact on society through decarbonisation. and retain that passion to make a difference. You know, it's tough sometimes, and this industry, I say, it's not great at changing. I was probably about 6 months into working in the industry. I thought, God, not for me. I was off. I was leaving, and I stayed. But and thank God I did. But it's very hard. You know, it's some staid ways of working, some ingrained commercial models and ways of work. It's hard, but stick to it. Be passionate. And the leaders at the top of the industry, I know, are absolutely all ears. They need you. They need your energy. They need your appetite. They need your ideas and thoughts. I always remember a couple of years ago, I read a brilliant article about Extinction Rebellion. They were doing down the road here in the West End. They could have clogged up Trafalgar Square, and there was an engineer. I think he worked for Arup. I might have got it wrong, but publicity for Arup there. He was going along on his electric scooter, and they were saying, "Look, you know, where are you going? How can you possibly go to work? And how can you possibly not, you know, help us campaign here?" He said, "Well, I work for Arup, an engineer. I'm trying to actually build a sustainable future. I'm dealing with climate change. It's my day job." I thought, what an amazing response. You know, if we could absolutely get that message out into schools, colleges, and bring that, capture it into what we do, how strong would that be? Final thoughts. Look, Hannah and Imogen were talking about, you know, what do I want us to hope for from COP26? Firstly, 26, I hadn't realised until recently, it's the 26th climate change conference, actually. As a answer, you think, blimey, what happened to the 25? But look, we live in hope. You know, it's been put back. I know we're hosting it in the UK. What an opportunity for us all. I hope for our industry it's a platform where the message is out that this industry are absolutely going to be the catalyst, the heart of solving this problem. I hope it challenges us over the back of it. It gives us a shot of adrenaline, perhaps, to absolutely do something about it, and we can retain that going forward. I think we want to see into the details, commitment to investment in renewable energy and make it happen, and also really get a head around retrofit, which I think we're behind on. If we're going to deal with decarbonisation, we've got to get retrofit right. And I hope also we can collaborate across boundaries. I mean, that international, global boundaries. You know, we could be world leaders in decarbonisation, in renewable energy, and we export it around the world. So what an opportunity we have as a UK construction and infrastructure sector. So look, my final thoughts before I hand over to the experts. This is real. Get your head around it. This is absolutely real. This industry is the biggest cause of global warming. We've got to sort it out. Our industry has the great opportunity to save the planet. What an amazing opportunity we've got. But we need you, the now generation, to absolutely deliver on this change. Be relentless, be passionate about it, understand it, and make a difference every day. I think we're going to show a quick video now, which is a video that we use internally for Turner Townsend, which I thought would just set the scene as well for the rest of the afternoon. Thanks.
We all grow up wanting to change the world for the better. But by the time we've reached positions of authority, the grand ambitions we had have been replaced by corporate buzzwords and office politics. The world is changing faster than it ever has before. Major global issues are now at the forefront of society's conscience. Issues which used to be sidelined, now instant communication means the collective desires of the many can no longer be ignored, and change is being forced on the reluctant. As the built environment touches all aspects of our daily lives, our industry sits right in the middle of this melting pot. But right now, the industry is part of the problem rather than the solution.
Now is the time that the industry needs to transform. Our industry accounts for 40% of global carbon emissions. We have a responsibility to change. We have an opportunity to design with an asset's full life cycle in mind, and in turn, reduce waste and build greener, more sustainable communities. To deliver clean water, clean power, safe housing, and more reliable infrastructure. We have a responsibility to utilize technology to lead the digital revolution, to educate and bring through new ideas and talent in an industry that has been stuck in its way for too long. Technology is an enabler, not a threat.
Every day, organisations are making new commitments that put sustainability at the heart of their operations. What's your commitment going to be? It's natural to think these issues are too big to solve, but the truth is they're not. It's just an understanding that we all play a part. Now is our chance to redefine what we consider a successful outcome to be, and drive performance in an industry that's fundamental to solving society's burning issues, to define the impact we will have for generations to come. We need to rediscover that childhood ambition to change the world for the better.
The next part of the event is the innovation deep dives. So we're going to go into those specific innovations that are happening in the industry. We've got some subject matter experts in their field, which I'm kind of really excited to hear from. So I will hand over now to Dr. Natasha Watson. She works with Bureau Happold, and she'll be talking us through everything in relation to mud, glorious mud, and earth construction.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Hannah. I'm going to have to speak a bit like that. Can you hear me? No? Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. So, yes, like I said, I'm going to talk to you about earth construction. So what is earth construction? It's essentially anything to do with earth. Some of the oldest buildings in the world are made out of earth construction, the Great Wall of China. You can apply it in many different ways, not just that image in the bottom central photo there, which probably springs to mind for most of you. You can make it into bricks, you can compact it, you can apply it. So that one in the top middle there is called wattle and daub. That's a very traditional English construction. And then on the top left-hand side, that's also called straw clay. So that's straw panels mixed in with clay and put it into a timber frame. So, next slide, please. There you go. So those are a couple of sort of very close-up examples, but actually I want to show you a couple of modern day examples as well. It's not just a hobbit house. You can get modern day examples from all over the world, and there are many architects and many clients who really like the look of this material. In the lower right-hand side, that's actually a field station that I've been working on in Madagascar, where we're using something called interlocking stabilized soil blocks to form a Lima research station. And to be honest, it's like earth Lego, and it pretty much puts together like bricks. So what is earth construction? I think to answer this, we should probably talk about what concrete is made from. So concrete is gravel plus sand plus water plus cement. And what are fired bricks made out of? They are made out of sand, they're made out of water and clay. So understanding this, we can actually understand what earth is made out of as well. Oh, sorry, bricks are also fired too. So you have the similar components with concrete. You've got your gravel, you've got your sand, and you've got your water. And you do have your clay, but you don't necessarily fire it. This is also known as unstabilized earth construction. But sometimes you can add a little bit of cement in there as well. And that's called stabilized earth construction. Now, when we look at these all together, where do you think the carbon emissions come from with these 4 different materials? It actually comes from the cement content, and it comes from the firing process itself. This is why when you look at stabilized earth construction and unstabilized earth construction, you can get much lower embodied carbon values per meter squared. This is why I think it's a really good material for low carbon construction in the future. So, advantages and disadvantages. Apart from being low carbon, earth construction can also passively regulate internal temperature and moisture if left exposed on the internal faces of your houses and your buildings. It comes in a wide variety of colors and patterns. As I mentioned before, the brick style construction, like those interlocking stabilized soil blocks, can be really quite straightforward for our bricklayers in the UK to learn. And also, because we're not putting together the cement and the firing costs, it's typically a lower material cost as well. Furthermore, it can work with innovative techniques such as 3D printing and modular construction. Some of the disadvantages are that the monolithic style of earth construction, such as rammed earth and cob, may need upskilling in many locations. This kind of construction as well may need maintenance every 5 to 10 years. But with us looking after our buildings more in the future, I don't think that this is necessarily a disadvantage that we can't overcome. Material testing may be needed if commercial products aren't used, but if you know that early on, you can factor that into your program and into your costing. There may be lower availability of materials than typical concrete blocks and clay bricks, but with increased demand may come increased availability, and then potentially it can be viewed as risky as it's not as common. So what can you do to expand our use of earth construction? Keep up to date with modern examples via newsletters and publications such as Dezeen, Tree Hugger, and Arch Daily. Earth construction can be treated similarly to low strength masonry and concrete, as it's pretty much the same materials. So where can you see those materials being used? Could earth construction be used instead? And then finally, don't be put off if someone initially dismisses earth construction with no solid reason. They're probably just scared and don't know enough about the material. So definitely push the boundaries out there, ask them for their reasons as to why they think it's a bad idea. On the right-hand side there is a 7-meter high rammed earth lecture theatre in the Centre of Alternative Technology that Bura Happold worked on, I think 11 years ago now. And I think it's a really beautiful example of how earth construction can be used in modern day architecture. So thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Natasha. That was fascinating. And when I first saw the headline there, I was thinking Hobbit houses, and I'm really glad that you've at least changed my mind on what that means. So really interesting to see, and I hope that sort of opened other people's eyes to actually the kind of what is behind traditional construction materials and how we can change them going forward. Next, I would like to welcome Tabitha Binding to the stage. So Tabitha is University and Regional Engagement Manager at the Timber Trade Federation, and she'll be helping us see the wood from the trees.
Hello. Get myself started to saying, let's see if everything works. Oops, I'm going backwards. That doesn't help, does it? Yeah, there you go. C2 superstructure. Quick question. Do any of you use timber? There's a question, one nod. Did any of you study timber at university? Oh, there's a few. Brilliant. I feel more at home now. I started with timber way back in, I don't know where I press this button now. I press it, share it anywhere? There you go. Way back when I was 15, we were coppicing hazel. And I'm a lot older than 15 now. I'm almost double your sort of age in construction use. There you go. So hardwoods and softwoods. It all starts with the seeds. Where am I going? Basically, that's what it's nothing to do with the density or the durability. It all comes back to the seed. So basically, you can really ignore whether it's a hardwood or softwood. Softwoods, often grown in plantations with a rotation starting at 40 years, mostly evergreen with needle-shaped leaves. 650 species, about 60 in commercial use, and 80% or more of the timber used for construction in the UK is softwood. Hardwoods, or the angiosperms, mainly deciduous, but some evergreen, broad-leaved, 50,000 species, about 2,000 in commercial use, but most have specialized end uses. So when you're asking for timber, what exactly are you asking for? It's like asking for a fruit or a vegetable. There's an A, there's no Z-based materials. I'm not sure if that's me. No? Not me? What are you looking for? Are you looking for strength or durability, for stability, for density, for appearance, for resistance to wear and impact, for ease of coating and performance of coating, resistance to chemical attack or insect attack? These 150 species. So press it again. So timber grows on trees. I know, I had one laugh. And to maturity, a tree can take it's on. Okay. So where was I? So to maturity, a tree can take tens or hundreds of years. And trees grow from the inside out. They start at the pith and add a layer of early and then late wood annually. These are known as the growth rings. And as the tree ages, the trunk thickens with the sapwood on the exterior. So the living part of the tree is the sapwood, but the center is no longer alive because it's no longer needed to carry the nutrients, and this turns into the heartwood. So what do you need? You need seed, you need sunlight, you need water and some earth, and we grow a fantastic building material. But sequestration occurs through the process of photosynthesis, whereby trees exploit the sunlight to combine atmospheric carbon dioxide with water to produce carbohydrates that become incorporated into the body of the tree, and oxygen is released into the atmosphere. The amount of carbon sequestered depends on the species, but typically 1 ton of dry wood contains 500 kilograms of carbon. This ton of wood will have absorbed approximately 1.8 ton of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So that's a ton. I'm not talking volumes now, I'm talking the weight. And that is a dry ton. So it's got no moisture in it whatsoever. Commercial forests are planted for timber production. So every year trees grow and we cut them down. The difference between annual growth and the annual felling is known as the annual increment. And in Europe, the annual growth exceeds the annual felling. So we have more standing timber every year because we are not felling it faster than it's growing. And every 20 seconds currently in the EU, the forests are growing enough timber to manufacture 60 cubic meters of cross-laminated timber. So that's 60 cubic meters of solid timber. But how do we know that those forests are being replanted? You need to be specifying sustainable timber. So look for PEFC, FSC, grown in Britain. And if you're using hardwoods, that's Fleg T. The forests are themselves certified, and you can then have a chain of custody through to the sawmill, through to the manufacturing, through to your building site. And you can have your whole building certified if that is what you want to do. But we've used timber in construction for thousands of years. This here is a Greenstead Church in Essex, thought to be about 900 years old. So that's the 11th century. And on the right, there's the Red Lion in Hereford, which is the 14th century. And just, you can make it out of there, it's the crock frame. But we still use old timber practice is in new buildings. So this is a fantastic project down in an Oxfordshire woodland, and it's a modern crock frame with all the timber coming from this one woodland. And they've milled it, they've made the cladding, they've made the whole frame, they've made the shingles on the roof, all with timber from that particular woodland. Lovely, lovely building to go and see. but we used to be limited depending on the size of the tree. But fairly newly, we have now engineered timber, which is what I mentioned about CLT. So you can see on the left there, that's a normal milling pattern of a log. And there on the right, this is one of the diagrams from Trada. If you follow it from the log, you get your swan timber, which you can turn into glulam, you can turn it into metal web joists, you can turn it into dowlam, you can turn it into cross-laminated timber, or you can use it in the solid section as the webs, the flanges, sorry, for the I-joists, or you can chip it and turn it into OSB, or you can peel it and turn it into plywood. So there's a myriad of products that you can specify. And these are just the structural ones. I'm just going to run you quickly now through a few buildings. So tall timber buildings. This one was completed in 2019 in Norway, and it was the tallest timber building at 85.4 meters, 18 stories tall, and consists of glulam and CLT. But our tallest building at the time, back in 2009, was the War Thistleton Murray Grove. The first story is concrete and followed by another 8 stories in cross-laminated timber. I am running out of time so very quickly. This was built it was a quick and efficient build. I'm going to quickly go to Dalston Lane, if this will move, which was one of the largest timber buildings by volume, and it won't move on. Oh, it has done there. And I've jumped one. So just mentioned Dalston Lane used up 4,649 cubic meters of CLT. It was in 2 buildings, very light in comparison with concrete and steel. And there was 35% more homes on that site because of using timber. And there was 589 less deliveries to site. I don't know if it's going to move. Ah, there we go. I don't dare press it again now. So short timber, that was larch corner, fantastic building. You're going to go and have to look it up yourselves. Floating timber. Why I want to measure this one? So it's constructed from plywood, reclaimed Western red cedar, Douglas fir, and recycled timber from garden sheds, fences, and disused buildings. And it floated on a river for a year, and a gentleman lived in it. Designing for fire. Jump to slide. So we don't have to just use it structurally. We can use it for insulation, has fantastic properties. It ameliorates the peaks and troughs in heat. It also can hold a certain amount of moisture. We can use it for flooring. We can use it in windows and doors. We can use it as cladding. The cladding on the far right there is brimstone. It's heat treated hardwoods from the UK. Have a look up of that when you get a chance. Move on. So design for fire. All buildings need to be designed for fire regulations. Timber burns, but it chars at a predictable rate. You've got 2 ways of dealing with it: designing for that predictable rate and working with your fire engineers, or encapsulate it, or do both together. Moisture. Design for moisture, both in construction and in use. Then you will have very little problems, and you will have buildings that could last thousands of years. And to minimize its use. This came from a project that we ran with students called Riverside Sunderland. And this is the winning team who worked through, should they use CLT, should they use CLT and ribs, or should they use I-joists? They cut down the material quantities, so the cubic meterage, and the weight of the building. So the amount of carbon was less, but the embodied carbon was less. How much timber do you actually need? Don't get hung up on wanting to use CLT or glulam when you could be using something like I-joists. So we do have a lot of timber, but use it wisely and well. I'm hoping that is the last slide. And my question to you, how will you use timber? And if you are going to use it wisely and well, and if you don't know about it, please come and ask us. We're at TRADA, we're at the Timber Trade Federation, and we're also the Structural Timber Association. Don't be afraid to ask.
Thank you very much. So Tabitha and Natasha there were both really talking about materials and what materials we can use in construction going forward, what innovations there have been. And I think from my perspective, it's really interesting to see how in the materials part of construction, we're now looking at going back to our environmental roots, taking earth construction, taking timber, rather than necessarily looking at traditional ways of manufacturing and new materials, although I'm sure there are some. But quite often in these sustainability kind of innovations, it is about going back to our environmental roots and finding what works best from what we have. So now, a slightly different topic, we're moving on to modern methods of construction, which is definitely probably not from kind of the environmental roots that we talk about. Nonetheless, very exciting and huge innovations in terms of what we can do on site and off site. So firstly, I would like to introduce Vytautas, who is Global Sales Coordinator at Cobod, and he is going to talk about 3D printing in construction. And he's joining us online. Hello, Vytautas.
Hello there. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, very well.
Excellent. Super. Thank you for the introduction again. My name is Vytautas, a hard name. I come from Lithuania, and I work in Cobod International, which is 3D construction printing technology providers. So if we will go to the next slide, we will see that today I will quickly go through about Cobod, who we are and what we do, why 3D construction printing is interesting, and we will head into a bit into sustainability, into new materials, and we will take a look maybe non-conventionally how 3D construction printing is interesting. Yes, next slide, please. Yes, so Cobod is a globally leading 3D construction printer provider. We are providing what we call a gantry printers. There's a few different printers. There's basically robotic arm printers and gantry printers. So gantry printers are such huge structures that within their, within their reach, they're able to print any kind of shape or figure that you tell it to print. And what 3D construction printers in essence enable is faster, cheaper, and safer construction with more form of freedom and use of less materials. And almost all concrete applications can be addressed. And our company is based in Denmark, Copenhagen, and we're 50% international, and we're only around 60 employees, but we're growing really, really fast. And some of our projects are the very first in the world. For example, like the very first 3D printed building in Europe, 2-story and 3-story buildings in Europe, villas in UAE, schools and houses in Africa, in India, and even windmill turbine tower bases. And on the right side, you can see some of the projects, some of which look really 3D printed with baby layers and so on, and some just look like normal conventional buildings. So this is the technology that is coming and is really exciting. Next slide, please. Yes, so why is it interesting? Why are we going there? So there's 4 main advantages. One of them is, of course, automation. Which in essence means that we're reducing labor cost on site in the construction. And of course, this is also an advantage that there will be less need for already scarce skilled workforce. And of course, when we have this industry where, let's say, the average construction worker's age is quite high, and young people don't really want, like myself, go into this hard labor of doing construction, we see that there is a really need to address this problem. And of course, having less people on site makes less accidents and gives more precision in the construction. Of course, the second thing is speed. So faster project execution means faster returns and less interest paid. So a lot of companies really focus on executing projects as fast as possible because, of course, the demand for housing is just going up. Number 3 would, of course, be form freedom. So this creates an opportunity to make more architecturally interesting designs and provides a lot of design advantages, where it also, let's say, creates new possible solutions, creates new possibilities for entirely different solutions. And of course, number 4 on sustainability, where we have less waste, we have less materials used, more efficient designs, and of course, exploring new materials. So if we will go to the next slide, we can go a bit deeper into that. So less waste. Of course, when we have precast elements, we have usually predefined sizes. We have to fit them into let's say, the projects, or if there's some errors, we have to cut them. So in essence, with 3D construction printing, we don't really use precast. We print them as they are needed. We use, or we print only what is needed. Of course, then if we're working on site, when we put the printer and print up the house in the place where it should stand, we of course can use less reinforcement, because most of the precast elements most likely will require to have some sort of reinforcement inside them just for the transportation. So it's an advantage sometimes to have everything being done on site. And of course, we are enabling new solutions which let's say, were previously not possible or too expensive to address. So, for example, GE and LafargeHolcim and us are cooperating on 3D printing windmill turbine tower bases, where the problem is that the higher you go with the windmill turbine tower, which is a pretty large steel structure, the cost goes exponentially. And of course, the higher you go with the tower, the larger the base has to be. And to transport such huge elements, you kind of hit this restrictions, road restrictions. So we're addressing quite a few problems by printing on site and just having this new and innovative solution. Next slide, please. Yes, and of course, 3D construction printing and new materials. So we're building, let's say, new kinds of structures with new kinds of methods to address these building standards and such. And in 2017, we actually have printed the very first building in Europe, and it had 23% of recycled materials in its mixture. So we used what is called recycled roof tiles. And on the right picture, you can see small brown aggregates, which are the recycled materials. Therefore, we are also trying to look into it in a bit more greener perspective, where we could incorporate recycled materials in our buildings and just print with those new materials. And of course, I've myself been speaking with quite a lot construction material producers, which are looking into these solutions and how can we print with more sustainable materials? How can we use less cement and create, in essence, carbon neutral houses with this technology? So the industry is definitely looking into it in a very innovative way. Next slide, please. Yes, and let's just take a look at that. With 3D printing or 3D construction printing, you cannot think inside the box. You have to think outside the box. So there's this famous GE fuel nozzle case where GE came to this particular 3D printing guy and said, okay, we have this part which is made out of 20 smaller different parts, and we're looking into 3D printing and how can we reduce the cost and how can we make it more efficient? And the 3D printing guy said, okay, but I won't print it for you, those 20 small different parts. And the GE said, okay, but why? We're GE, we're huge guys. Why do you not want to do this? And the 3D printing guy just said, because it's stupid. You have to redesign it to, let's say, fit with the technology. So what he did was he redesigned those 20 different parts and made it all into one model, where then he just printed it as it is, a one part out from 20 parts, which in essence meant that this increased their production rate, no need for assembly, and of course reduced the weight by 25%, where this part was used in the airline industry, and reduction in weight is very, very important there. So again, this tells you that when you're thinking about 3D printing or 3D construction printing, you have to, let's say, utilize the technology in different ways than what is, let's say, is in conventional methods. And if we go to the next slide, I have a quick video prepared just to show you these printers and compare the scale. So it was quite a big printer, right? And from my side, that would be it. Of course, I thank you for your attention. And if you want to see much more cool stuff, be sure to visit our YouTube channel. There you will see some cool 3D construction video time lapses and such. So I hope it got your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much for Tatas. That was so interesting. I didn't quite realize the scale of a 3D printer in this sort of context. I sort of imagined, oh, I use it for construction, but how does that work in terms of, is it still a little printer that you see on the side for traditional models? But that is absolutely mind-blowing, actually, seeing that in action and seeing it work there. So thank you so much. So from 3D printing, we're going on to modular housing. So modular housing is, really interesting. It's something that's been around in construction for quite a while, and traditionally has a fairly negative image. Some people associate that with, the prefab housing of old. But nowadays, modular housing is a lot more advanced. It can produce beautiful, practical, and functional buildings. So I'd really like to welcome Rosie Toogood, who is CEO of LNG Modular Homes, to talk to us all about modular housing and making it a reality on site. So Rosie, over to you. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, Imogen. I have some slides to show. Can you project them, please? That's great, thank you. So what you see there is one of our first sites at Selby, which is actually what you see in front of you there is 4 months into construction, so some quite good progress. But if I, as Imogen says, just talk to you about what I like to call as the new modular construction industry, something quite different than of old. And I think a number of the other speakers have highlighted, effectively the dual challenge that we have to solve a housing crisis. There are over 400,000 homeless people in the UK, one of the richest countries in the world. And, we have to solve the crisis. It's our duty to solve this housing crisis in the context of the climate change that we're all tackling as well. And, you know, as one of the earlier speakers pointed out, you know, 60% of global emissions come from our industry and what we do and the use of our products. So, you know, quite a challenge to address in terms of both the housing need and the need to limit carbon emissions and address climate change. So next slide, please. At Legal & General, we made the decision some time ago to invest in a modular construction business, and I think quite an interesting and bold move by what a lot of people see as one of the UK's biggest insurance companies. But the truth is, L&G is one of the UK's biggest investors in UK infrastructure, and that was the purpose behind the investment, to be part of the L&G portfolio and building Britain, building back Britain, building a new Britain, which has got the infrastructure it needs to continue to grow into the 21st century. And our vision in relation to modular housing is, as we say there, making the housing market fairer for all. So we're part of L&G's effectively housing division, which has a private sale division, a later living division, an affordable housing division, and a suburban build to rent division. And we supply houses not just to those businesses, but also to third parties. And we make them in a very different way. And I'll show you some pictures from our factory in a moment. But, you know, we're borrowing techniques from the automotive and aerospace industries and bringing to the construction industry methods, tools, processes, systems, techniques that have been used in other industries and proven in other industries to, you know, drive down cost, drive up productivity, drive up quality, and pass value to the customer. And that's what this is all about, really making sure that our customer gets a good value product for what is probably going to be one of the most expensive purchases or one of their biggest outgoings on a monthly basis in their life. So, you know, as a company, we don't just build boxes in a factory, we develop land. So we do everything from the initial land evaluation and appraisal, master planning, take it through planning, develop the design for the scheme, obviously, build the modules in the factory, and then go on to build the homes on site and put all the infrastructure in place and put the placemaking in place. So, you know, that's a big undertaking. It's one that we are, you know, we've spent 4 years getting to where we are now, where we're able to deliver at scale, and we're active now on 3 sites throughout the country. And by this time next year, we'll be active on 10 sites throughout the country, you know, growing a pipeline of over 1,000 homes built in the next 18 months, and ultimately getting to 3,500 homes per year from the factory that we have in Sherburn and Elmet. And if I just flip into the next slide, please, you can see a snapshot of the factory in Sherburn and Elmet, which is just south of York. And, you know, what we're doing is, you know, investing to transform the industry. So what you see there is our house production line. You see the modules coming down that production line. Our houses are made of cross-laminated timber. Our apartments are made of concrete and steel to address the requirements to going high and fire regulations. And, you know, we're building new capacity for the industry via this approach, you know, bringing in people from all walks of life, you know, so you don't need the skills that you would traditionally need to build a home. We teach them in our modular academy to do the work that they need to build the houses that we're building on that production line. And as a result of the way in which we have designed our products, we've designed out some of the more complex processes. We've standardized and simplified them and broken them down into steps so that we can bring people from all walks of life into the factory and train them to do a job that would need a skilled artisan or a skilled experienced member of the construction industry on site by good design, good simplification, good training. And that allows us to build new capacity, deliver homes at a different quality level than currently being delivered by the industry, you know, with speed, and generate new skills. And I think most importantly in the current context, with less waste, because that waste has been designed out, and that we are, you know, we are doing things to a standard approach. So we produce less waste in the way in which we're developing our products. It's a big investment, both in terms of time and money. So we have developed all of our designs to a level of detail that isn't familiar in construction industry. So we do need to know the lengths of timber we need, the lengths of wiring we need, and be able to measure them exactly so they can be installed in those modules. So we go to a level of detail and implement that within our design system, our product data management system, and our ERP system, which cascades the requirements out through the supply chain and into our manufacturing facility. And you see that production line there. The eagle-eyed amongst you will notice as you go back through that picture that the modules are progressing. It's not a static line. They move through the factory, and there's standard work carried out at each workstation, gradually building up to a completed module at the end of the line. As we go through each workstation, we have different teams working at each workstation, doing the same work on a daily basis, making sure it's delivered to a good quality standard. And as the modules move from one station to the next, we do quality overchecks to make sure that when modules get to the end of the line, they have the minimum number of snags. And we're already at this very early stage getting to the point where we only have typically 6 snags at the end of the process. And I think that's kind of world beating from a construction industry perspective. And the first thing we do when we identify those 6 snags is rectify them before we send the modules out to the construction site. So, really a different approach. And from a design perspective, we're taking, what we call a fabric first approach, making sure that we are choosing the right materials to do the right duty, making sure they are environmentally friendly in the way in which they're produced, they're low carbon in the way in which they're produced, and they're the right duty, the right standard to do the duty that's required of them through the whole life. And the focus is not just on operational carbon and making sure that the homes are efficient, but on whole life carbon, make sure that we use as little energy as possible, both in the manufacture and assembly of the homes on site, but also in the choice of materials as they come through the process. So if we go on to the next slide, you'll see a construction site in process. And again, as one of the earlier speakers mentioned, significant reduction in the number of visits to site in order to construct these homes. So, as I said earlier, this is about 4 months' work on a construction site. We're building 102 homes on this particular site. And the work that we do on site is to brick up the modules, put the roof on, and then put the services and infrastructure in and do the landscaping and roadworks. And when you're inside a module, once the module's been connected together, apart from some small elements of what we call zip up, you would think you were in a home that was already fit to be occupied as soon as the modules are landed. There's very little work done inside. So all kitchens are fitted, bathrooms fitted, painting and decorating done, floor coverings on if that's what the customer requires. So it really does look like a finished home when it comes off the end of the production line and goes onto the lorry and on to be delivered on site. We go to the next slide. And here you see the interior of one of the show homes that you saw on the previous slide at our site in Selby. This is a 3-bedroom home with a open plan kitchen, and I hope I'm doing some work to dispel the myths of prefab. And you're seeing here a home that's really fit for the 21st century in terms of its fit and finish and a new century modular home which really is as good or better than traditionally built homes. And that's our objective, to get to the point where we can deliver through the modular industry homes that people want to live in. And if we go to next slide, want to live in not just because of how they look, but how they operate. So we've talked about saving time and in the way in which modules are delivered to site, and everything's complete when they arrive on site, and the good quality. Cost certainty is far higher when you're building in a factory, because your bill of materials, all your parts, and you manage that more effectively. Obviously, don't let weather get in the way, because we're building inside the factory, and when we finish on site, we've got far less work to do than on a normal construction site, and you don't have the trades interacting with each other and working on top of each other. And the speed of delivery on site is much shorter. So a typical development would be delivered in, of 100 homes would be delivered in about a year through our current method of construction. You know, on top of this, all of our homes are delivered as Energy Performance Certificate A. So, you know, that puts them in the top 1% of all homes currently delivered in the UK for energy efficiency. As well as the Fabric First approach, they all come with photovoltaic cells. And, you know, from our second site onwards, all will be fitted with heat pumps rather than traditional gas boilers. And it's not really just about the home itself and the energy efficiency of the home itself. You know, there's good care and attention paid to the way in which we master plan the sites, both from a point of view of making sure that even simple things like orientation of homes is done in a way in which we avoid solar gain or too much solar gain, and homes are orientated effectively to capture the solar energy through the photovoltaic cells, but also that we create nice green spaces for people to share with their neighbours, build communities and enjoy through their lives. So, you know, I think through a number of different approaches, you know, what we're trying to do is change the way in which homes are delivered in the UK, being really ambitious about the targets we set ourselves for both energy efficiency of the homes, placemaking of the homes, and the efficiency with which we deliver, driving down carbon in production and in operation, and creating places that people aspire to live in, and creating good green places. On one of our sites down in Kent, we'll plant 8,500 trees, something that's quite mind-boggling in terms of a sort of, you know, ambition as a house builder to placemake in a very different way. But I think, you know, this momentum is building in the industry. Customers are challenging not just ourselves as modular manufacturers, but the traditional builders. And I think we can see a sea of change coming. And I think it's a real privilege to be part of a new modular industry, which is at the forefront of changing the UK house building industry and really bringing some new innovative designs and thoughts to what's being delivered in the UK. And I think this is a really great place to be part of. I'm looking forward to continuing to deliver great homes for our customers and change the way in which, change the landscape of Britain and the way in which we deliver housing.
Thank you, Rosie. I'm particularly taken there, Rosie, by the industry need that you're fulfilling and what you've kind of foreseen, because, you know, it's not just focused on carbon reduction. There's the whole piece around social value and delivering affordable homes for people and places that people want to live, provide them with not just a home, but an area where they have access to amenities, which is, you know, another side of sustainability that maybe we don't touch upon enough, but is, again, really, really important and sits alongside carbon and how we address it. I'm also really impressed by these 6 snags at the end of the production line. I have been on site many a time where I'm going through like hundreds of snags, if not thousands. So the quality of modular housing now compared to on-site construction, I mean, there's probably just no comparison there, as well as the long list of benefits. I was just, you know, as you're reading through at the end on all those benefits, it kind of seems a bit silly that we're not using it more widely. But as you say, we're at the crest of this wave. So in no time, I'm sure that a lot more house builders would be adopting this approach and use of modular housing. So thank you very much for that. Thank you to all our speakers on the innovation deep dives. We're now going to take a refreshment break. So for those in the room, there is tea, coffee and water. For those online, put on your kettle. And we'll see you in 15 minutes. Thank you. So I hope you all enjoyed your refreshments. I hope those at home have had a nice break. So the next part of our session is a panel debate. I spoke about a few topics that we're going to cover, but we'll come to those in a second. We have 2 new members of the speaker team. So I'd like to welcome Joe Gilroy, who's Head of Sustainability at Kia Group, and also Kayla Friedman, who is Programme Director of the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. Welcome to the panel. And we have Vytautas and Rosie online as well. So the way this will work, because we have an in-person and online panel. I will try and direct questions to people as they kind of come in, and we'll set the theme of discussion and we will go from there. We also have Slido running in the background for those who do have Slido at home or, well, in the workplace you might be. Those in the room, you can still ask questions, get involved in polls. They're coming up on this iPad in front of me. So I'll also ask ones from there. So firstly, our topic of discussion we're going to start with is the speed of innovation. So are we innovating quick enough as an industry? We're quite notorious in the fact that, you know, in the last 50 years, we haven't actually done that much innovation. And the most of it has probably occurred in the last maybe 5 or 10. So I'm actually going to hand over first to Joe and just say, what is your view on the speed of innovation and what do you think can be done about this?
First, am I?
Yeah.
So are we going fast enough? No, is the short and succinct answer. No, we're not. We're not going remotely fast enough. And we're not going fast enough because we still don't fundamentally get it. It is kind of ludicrous that we still have to make the argument of, you know, we live on this planet. You know, we're not all Elon Musk. We're not all Jeff Bezos. I don't have a rocket. I'm not going to Mars. And when I get there, if I get there, can't sustain myself. But we're having these conversations. We're wrapping the business case around protecting what we fundamentally rely on in order to exist. And it's because we haven't really had enough examples of what truly happens when a business is unsustainable, when they don't work in a way that whereby we balance having a resilient environment with a resilient community with resilient profits. At the moment, we still do prioritize one over the other. So there has to be a fundamental rethink in the way that businesses are structured to create value. So at the moment, you know, the fundamental role of a business is to deliver a return to shareholders. We need to shift that as to, yes, we will deliver a return to shareholders, but not on a quarterly basis, on a long-term basis. For me, we have pockets of brilliance and excellence in our industry, but it does need to translate more into mainstream. And it needs to do that by, I mean, one of the ways I think that we can do that is by having fresh voices coming into the industry that don't just understand the engineering principles, but also understand the fundamentals of business and also understand the fundamentals of how to influence and persuade and get ideas through. Too often we have brilliant individuals, they're the entrepreneur or they're the intrapreneur, and they create it and they know where they're going with it. And the minute they hit that first point of resistance, because they're not a budget holder or they're not senior enough in the organization to actually get it through, they struggle because they haven't been taught those soft skills of being able to fundamentally manipulate others out of your way to get the job done. So for me, that's one of the things that we need to really concentrate on in our industry, upskilling our fresh thinkers, our fresh voices into how to talk the language of business and to get their innovations through.
Great, thanks, Joe. And I think that's a really good point there on sort of innovation and capability, making sure we get the right people in the industry to drive that innovation forward. Rosie, I'd like to hear your view there on kind of, Joe made a point around, you know, return to shareholders. And I know that L&G do have that long-term view on what that should be, and that's what you're driving. So, you know, that the innovation that you're doing in the modular housing unit, that kind of started as an idea and you've decided to invest in that early on, which has worked out really well. So I'd like to hear sort of your view on the speed of innovation now and how you at L&G are sort of impacting upon that.
Yeah, I mean, innovation comes in many and varied forms. You know, there's this sort of breakthrough innovation that totally transforms how things are doing. And then there's the, you know, everyday innovation and collaboration and team working that just results in doing, you know, what you did yesterday 5 minutes quicker and or to a better quality standard. And I think, you know, some innovation takes investment, and, you know, that is why you need to give a return to shareholders, because they provide the funds for you to continue to build and grow and develop the business. But I think, you know, the most important people are the people that work within the business, and the most important thing is that they bring the softer skills. You know, they're willing to share, they're willing to collaborate, they're willing to build. You know, and most innovation comes from not someone sitting in a cold, dark room, inventing something new. And even, if I can take that analogy one step further, even the guys who invented the light bulb, actually you all kind of pinched each other's ideas, and there was no light bulb moment. There was a gradual evolution of capability that resulted in the light bulb. But for me, the key thing is teamwork and collaboration, sharing across industry, and sharing with other people in the industry, and being brave. I'll let you into a little secret. I'm not talking to you from Legal and General Modular Homes. I'm talking to you from ILCA today, because we're working together. They're a competitor, a compatriot in the modular industry, but we're working together to drive innovation. It's those sorts of kind of brave, the brave new world concept of working together, I think, that will really propel us forward and change the industry.
Great, and I think that's a really good one about collaboration. We can learn a lot from each other, and also a lot from other industries too. That's where probably a lot of our ideas do come from, and how we implement them. So it's good to think about how we are a disruptor in our industry, and how we can bring that insight and collaborate with each other to make it happen. Tabitha, I'm quite interested to hear your view on innovation. Timber has been used for hundreds and hundreds of years, and we're now starting to use it in very different ways, as you showed us earlier. What do you think the speed of innovation has been like within the use of timber itself? And do you think that in 10 years' time we'll be using timber in a very different way?
Now, I hate the word innovation. I've seen too many innovative projects go so wrong. We know where we need to get to. It's those incremental steps, and that improving every time and reducing those mistakes. With timber, yes, I think we will be building with it. We will hopefully be retrofitting first with it, and only building if there is a real need for new construction. We will be using it more wisely, and we will be using it well. We will hopefully be doing more interdisciplinary working. We won't have, professions just working in isolation and then passing the buck when things start to go wrong. We need to look so much at things like the operational energy. So, one standard is the passive house standard, so large corner, which I showed. Design fabric first, minimize the energy that you will need to operate that building. Now with the gas crisis, it's huge. But with the timber industry, it's not so much now it's innovation, it's actually cutting our embodied carbon. How do we use less energy to produce the products that we will continue to use?
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting about your take on innovation. It's a really good point, actually, because we talk about innovation a lot, and actually how doable it is on the ground and how we make it happen and measure the impact of it is also really important. Do any of the speakers I haven't been to yet have anything they'd like to say on that, or in response to any of the other speakers? I'm just going to put it out there. Yes, Natasha?
Yep. So I'm I think I'm probably slightly more aligned with Tabitha's opinion, mainly because I think there's so much that we can do to improve our built environment by doing things that we've known for ages, just a little bit better, start talking to each other, understand, why does the facade engineer need that? Or why does the structural engineer need that? And especially with talking about sustainable design, there is a lot to be said for being comfortable with that uncertainty and being comfortable with what we don't know yet. Like, this is a new area for lots of us. And I think that, if you foster a society of trust, then you can say, you know what, I don't actually know what the best answer is here for us for embodied carbon or for sustainability, or I don't really know that much about passive house. And I think that when we all realize that we're going in the same direction, but we all have different levels of knowledge, I think that we can definitely push with that innovation a bit further. But I think, there's so much on the soft skills that Joe would definitely mentioned that, I don't think it's necessarily innovation. It's just us taking a step back and being comfortable with, being vulnerable in that way.
Thanks, Natasha. Kayla?
So I'm listening to all the speakers. I think what we shouldn't be thinking now is that we don't have the tools we need today to build well and correctly. So we shouldn't be talking about innovation as something we don't yet have to deliver future fit environments, because you look at any magazine, award ceremony, etc., there are exemplar best practice examples. My ongoing argument with people is that those are not exemplar best practice. That's what we should be doing, and everything else is substandard. But where we need innovation, which I guess the panel hasn't talked about, is in the processes, so procurement and legal processes. So when you talk to people about why they aren't doing those projects, what's holding you up, why can't you get it done, everyone points to someone else in the team, and that tends to be regulated by our procurement methods and contracting. And so I think we need to be rethinking the embedded processes of how we contract to deliver processes and the responsibilities, the insurance, all of it, construction loans, from the banking all the way through. These are the things that actually hinder people and hobble them. They want to make different decisions and then they feel they can't. So what I would be looking for is innovation in our procurement process, not necessarily technological innovation in materials.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think a lot of the work that I've definitely seen and the major infrastructure projects that I've worked on, such as large airports, for example, and international airports, not enough time and not enough thought is put into those processes and the supply chain and how to work with them effectively. So partner with the supply chain and not seeing a serial relationship that you have in terms of buying services. How do we turn this into something that is actually more of a relationship that develops over time? And how can we actually drive our carbon strategy through that using each other's help? Vytautas, I'm quite intrigued to get your view on this. What you do is very kind of new and interesting. And how does it apply to that innovative, or what I think is quite innovative in terms of 3D printing? How are you seeing that being adopted by other people, whether that's the clients you're selling to, or governments itself taking interest? What are your views on that in terms of the 3D printing industry?
Yeah, in general, I think the speed of innovation is quite fast, and it's maybe a bit too fast for let's say regulations or such to catch up. And maybe we don't really have that much problem in the speed of innovation, but we may have more of a problem in the speed of adaptation, where we have quite a lot of companies, especially in construction sector, very risk averse and are competing against each other, and there's just this let's say fear of change and implementing new processes, because of course that costs a lot of money to start something new and almost from scratch, and there's a need of let's say a lot of resources to start let's say exploring new field and new ways and new processes. So in terms of innovation, there's a lot of different and great research is being carried out, new products coming out, new technologies and softwares. But my biggest concern would be how fast can they adapt it and whether it will be adapted, because for all the new technologies, there's a need of investment.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to move on to capability now. I actually see one of the top questions that we have on Slido is completely aligned with what I want to ask the speakers. So I'm going to actually pick this question here. So what do you foresee the future skills for 2030 being? And I'm going to say that's within construction and within the industry that we're in. And I would like to throw that out to Kayla first.
Sure. So I'm going to go with communication. Let's assume that all people learning their deep discipline have learned it well. So if you're a good engineer, a good architect, a good developer, a good financier, you know your deep skill. And I don't think that that's where the problem lies. In education, it's that all of these people will need to work across their disciplines, and no one is taught in their education how to actually communicate across disciplines, how to understand what the other disciplines need, the KPIs that they're working to, the pressures they're under. And so we are miscommunicating with each other, and that's a lot of what the course that I work on is about. So actually we've polled our students and people in industry, said, what is the #1 skill you need for the future? And it's communication. You can't achieve anything unless you can talk to someone not like you.
That's really interesting, because we have a poll which is live at the moment, which is what is key to implementing sustainable change towards the targets of a net zero carbon industry by 2050. quite a long question. But the choices are technology, skills, innovative materials, or sustainable leadership. And 60% are saying that it's sustainable leadership that is the number one skill that you need, which for me is all about communication, and all about setting direction and getting others to follow along with you.
So I realize this is quite technical. Leadership and teamwork are competencies, and you need many skills to be a good leader or a good team worker. So when you say leadership, like what is a leader? They have good communication, they have good timekeeping, like there's skills and competencies. So absolutely, that's correct.
Yeah.
So what would be the number one skill of a good leader?
Yeah, communication. There you have it. Great. Thank you, Kayla. So you learn something new every day. That's brilliant. Thank you for that. So, right, still on the skills piece, Natasha, in your, structural engineer, what will that job look like in 2030, do you think?
So structural engineers in 2030, I think will be moving away from building new, definitely in the global north, where we typically have really good building stock. We will be more advisors, I think. We'll be advising on the existing buildings that we have around us, how they can be adapted, how they can be modified for changing uses. I mean, during COVID, our houses were our workplaces where we had entertainment, our social scene as well. So the fact that we've managed to adapt our houses to fulfill that, I can see that kind of adaptation of existing buildings for different loadings, or potentially adding a story on top, or, those kinds of things definitely being the skills that structural engineers will need in the future. We'll be advising on how to use your buildings better rather than necessarily building new.
Great, thank you for that. And Joe, in thinking about your team at Kia and the sort of skills that you're looking for going forward, what do you think kind of your team will look like in 2030?
Diverse is the answer, because we it's really interesting when you say sustainability leadership, and I couldn't agree more. What you're saying about communication. When I started in sustainability, I'm going to say leadership element of sustainability, it was very preachy. It was the cry of the eco warrior. It was the planet's on fire, we're all going to die, and it didn't land at any point with any discipline, whether you were talking about the commercial sector or the academic sector. It just didn't land. And through particularly the last 10 years, I've seen that sustainability teams, firstly, when I took the job at Kia, they said, right, you're going to need a sustainability team. I said, no, absolutely not. I do not want a team of like-minded individuals. What I want is I want a team of engineers, accountants, marketeers, sales, directors, managers. And what we have to be is that team that communicates. So one of the things that we did that made a tremendous difference on the sustainability leadership piece within Kia was we set up what we call SLFs. Now you guys will know, our industry loves an acronym. So we set up sustainability leadership forums, and we did it at every level of the business. And these are open forums where we say, doesn't matter what your background or your discipline or your expertise is, if you are an individual that is boots on the ground, that you are physically working in a way to drive forward our business, you have to take part in this conversation. So we set them up to specifically pull together individuals that needed to communicate. We identified leaders within those groups that could be the translator to start with, sort of working with different people to say, okay, when our finance person talks about EBITDA and PBIT, what they really mean is this. And when our engineer talks about, these elements, this is what they mean, etc. And when our bid team refers to these acronyms, this is what they mean, to be able to then drive forward progress. So for me, the sustainability teams of the future are the ones that are diverse in their business experience, diverse in their life experience. This is also something that we often don't have enough of. People quite often, rush from their education straight into business. I would say take the time, go traveling, learn about the world, learn about people, because it's the most invaluable skill in terms of building those communication tools that you're really going to need.
Great, thank you. And from my point of view, I completely agree. It's about giving everyone a voice in this discussion, and empowering those that do want to have a big say and want to take that forward, and they should be able to drive that too. Rosie, you mentioned earlier about the sort of the people that work in the warehouses putting together your modular homes, about how different of their skills are to what you traditionally might look for. So what do their skills look like, and are you going to see that change over the next few years to 2030, or are you sort of thinking about how you're going to keep the skills that you have and to build that capability and capacity within your teams?
It's a similar theme to what the other speakers are talking about. We like to say we don't recruit for aptitude, we recruit for attitude. We want people who are good collaborators, who are problem solvers, who are proactive, who are looking for things to do and looking to move the business and themselves forward. And we're not looking for deep knowledge and skills and capability in one direction. Generally, for the guys who work on the shop floor, we're looking for breadth. So we design out the complexity, and we look for people who can do multiple skills, and it's that flexibility, adaptability, ability to collaborate, that really I think will define the future in a lot of roles and really help shape a different industry.
Great, thank you, Rosie. Vitautas, for the skills that your kind of company has at the moment, are you looking to change that industry at all and invest in those skills and capabilities required for 3D printing? It's obviously very different, you probably need less people, but the capabilities are very different. And are those sort of capabilities looking to change over time, or is the world of 3D printing, going to stay as it is for a while? I presume not.
No, in essence, I would first of all agree with Rosie on having proactive people, young people, and eager to learn, because that is in essence all we need. The 3D construction printing is not a rocket science. Of course, there will be professions like engineers and architects that would mainly take this on, and basically it's not very hard for them to adapt to this technology and just have it. So I think in general, just young people who are eager to learn and who want to take this on, new 3D construction printing, let's say gig, they are very, very welcome. And we actually had quite a lot of projects, and one of them was very interesting for us, where we basically taught a small group of students who then just conveyed this knowledge to other students, and in the end they came up with a very nice 3D printed 2-story building. So in essence, we are not looking into changing tremendously what is being thought now in terms of architecture or engineering, but we more or less let them adapt the existing knowledge that they have, and let's say making some incremental changes in their skills.
Great, thank you. Does anyone in the room have a question they'd like to ask on capability? If so, can you put your hand up? I'd like to just open the floor to questions. Anyone? Someone must have a question on capability. Come on. Be brave. Adam, our resident cameraman, do you have a question on capability?
Has anybody got a question?
Oh no, I've got plenty of questions. I was just making sure I include the audience. So
I'll ask one question.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Can you put these 4 words into order? What's most important? So, people, planet, purpose, profit.
Blimey. Right, I'll Tabitha, would you like to have a first stab at that one? So we've got people, purpose, profit, and planet. I think that's right.
So I'm planet or people? I'm sort of, without the planet, we can have no people. The planet can survive without people. Profit definitely last. Purpose third, but planet and people, yeah, I can't choose between the two.
Any, that's okay. Anyone else on the panel have a view on the priority of those?
I'm going to be really controversial. I'm going to challenge because it depends who you're asking the question to. But
Yeah.
in terms of this audience, I'm going to be really controversial and say profit. And I'm going to say profit because that's the challenge you've got to tackle first. We have to redesign why we are making profit, who we are making profit for, how we are sharing profit, how we are reinvesting profit, what we are reinvesting it in. At the moment, the profit equation is not aligned to sustainability. How do we incentivize sales teams? Sell as much as possible, as quickly as possible, as fast as you can, and you get your bonus. That's not sustainable. What if you were to realign that so that the way that people got their bonuses and their incentive packages was the more sustainable you are, the more you get. At the moment, we're all motivated by various things. A lot of us are motivated by money. At the moment, the more unsustainable you are, the more money you get. So I say crack the profit equation first and the rest will follow.
Great, big task to overcome first. Yes, Rosie?
Yeah, I mean, I would actually go for purpose, you know, and I think organizations that really think through what their purpose is kind of bind the other three together in a really constructive way. And I mean, it's not, I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not going to say we've cracked it, but I think, you know, people are really looking for something that they can connect with and something deeper. And you know, I think if you can get the purpose right, and you can bind people and motivate them and get them doing the right things in the right situation without you having to tell them, because they know deep down they're the right things to do.
Great, thank you for that, Rosie. And I think we do have a question in the room. Adam, if you want to take the mic. While we just wait for the mic to go, I would, on the purpose piece, one of my favorite books is actually all around autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And it's Daniel Pink. My microphone's going on off. And that really, for me, I really enjoyed that book. It's all around, there is the monetary issue and there is profit driving us, but at the heart of us as individuals and motivating us at work, at home, in our relationships, it's about purpose in what we do and having purpose in what we do. It's about mastery over that, so how good we are at what we do, and autonomy to do that, so freedom to actually deliver it how I want to deliver it and be creative. So yeah, on the purpose piece, Rosie, I think that's a really good point. Right, question in the room.
So kind of links back to the first point and ties in with what we've just been talking about. But we acknowledge that we haven't been bringing about innovation at a quick enough pace. And we've also just acknowledged that this industry is very profit driven. And so I just wondered if you had any ideas on how we actually bring about the transformative change required, because it's been profit driven for a long time and it's going to probably continue to be profit driven and risk averse, as we've acknowledged. So like, how do we actually change that and put sustainability at the heart of it? Because clearly we've spent quite a long saying that is what needs to happen. So I just wondered if you had any ideas about how we actually bring about that change.
Kayla.
Okay, I've been holding on to this fact and trying to work out when I'm going to use it, because I think I really want to impart something to all of you. In 2050, there will be 2 billion more people on the planet. They don't have a place to live, work, go to school, have hospitals, etc. That means we need to build London every 6 weeks from now to 2050. When you talk about the opportunity in the built environment, it's there. Like, the demand is really high. It's not necessarily in the developed world, right? So what we need to do is work with the resources we have in the developed world to build as little as possible and use very carefully the carbon. We don't really have a carbon budget, but incredibly minimize any carbon we spend. And then look to help the rest of the world meet the great demand that they will have to give people good lives in a sustainable way. Because if you build London every 6 weeks unsustainably, the planet has no chance.
That is a great fact. I've written that down. I'm going to use that again at some point soon. Joe.
Such a great question. And yeah, I love that fact. I'm going to nick that too. I think there's a couple of things there. Firstly, I would say that it's not just our industry. Every industry is profit driven. But what is great about this industry is that we're having this conversation now. For me, one of the big changes that we have to do to drive that innovation, we have to put sustainability in the language of business. We are still stuck, and I should say, the right language of business. At the moment, I feel that the conversation of sustainability in this industry in particular is stuck in two spaces. The first one, which is the environmental space of we must do it, we must save the planet. Now that doesn't land, because it's the business decision makers that you're trying to get to change, and they are driven by quarterly returns. So that argument doesn't translate into business. There is no commerciality around that language. Then we have sustainability at the polar opposite end, where it's in the competitive space. So it's absolutely bonkers that as an industry, we actively compete on sustainability. It would be the same as saying that we compete on safety. That's just nuts. We have a responsibility to keep our staff safe. We should never compete on that. But because sustainability is now in the language of competition, it does a couple of things. Firstly, it encourages greenwashing. So it encourages companies to outbid one another in that marketing space without knowing how they're actually going to deliver. And secondly, when organizations are doing the right thing, which involves a tremendous degree of innovation, which, as you all know, involves a tremendous degree of learning from your mistakes. You try something, it didn't work, whoops, okay, right, take those learnings, try again. That didn't quite work, right, try again. It makes it a very dangerous space to put your head above the parapet and say, okay, we're going to try something different. Didn't work. In fact, it was bordering on a semi-disaster, but we learned this one great thing and we're taking it over here. It becomes a very dangerous space to have an honest conversation. And only from honesty do we then get that communication piece, do we then get that collaboration piece? Can we then sort of turn around to customers and say, I appreciate you want the all singing, all dancing, most sustainable building, I get it. And I appreciate that you want it in 6 weeks, but we can't do it in that time. We need longer. You need to pay more for it, et cetera, et cetera. We can't have that honest conversation yet. So sustainability for me needs to come back into the pure language of business, where your decision makers, the ones that hold those budgets, get it, and they understand, okay, this fundamentally, there is a cost to doing it, but the cost of not doing it is 10 times great. I get it now because it's been put into the language of business. So that would be the answer for me, or one of them.
Natasha? So I would say that we start that change by everyone in this room making one decision tomorrow that, saves embodied carbon. Or if you're an architect, do you need to have that deflection criteria? If you're a QS, do you know how to price timber appropriately? If you are a procurement manager, do you know about partnering contracts where everyone holds responsibility in a different way? So I think the change for me, with pen and hand paper, doing some calculations, comes from my sphere of influence and knowing what decisions I can make to reduce embodied carbon, to improve biodiversity. Has biodiversity been taken into account in any of my projects? Asking those questions, being a bit disruptive. So that's how I think the change starts.
Great, I hope you've got some good answers there. Great question, thank you for that. And I think in that sphere of influence you mentioned there, I was just thinking around, what sphere of influences do you have at the moment and how that will grow over your career? So, by the end of your career, you have a huge sphere of influence that you can be making decisions that do impact upon this agenda every day from now. So starting to make those decisions now in terms of what you say, what you do, what you tell other people is also really important. So I'm just going to now move on to sort of our kind of final topic. And we do have a question here on it, which is really good. So the final topic is all around making it happen. Who can help make it happen from various different viewpoints. So you can have private companies, you can have government, financiers. So the question here on Slido, how can government support industry to speed up the transition to a sustainable construction industry? So what can government do essentially? This doesn't need to be UK focused, it can be globally focused, but I'd love to hear your views. And I'm just going to go to Vitautas first.
Yeah. So I would just quickly address basically the risk awareness fact that I mentioned, and here I would be looking into subsidizing more green solutions that would, in essence, hopefully initiate the business owners and such to take some action and start looking into more green solutions where it's more safer for them to approach them by having less risk into looking into that.
Thank you. Yeah, risk is a huge factor, and something that I think the industry does need support on addressing. Rosie, what are your thoughts on government and what more they can do? I'm sure you've probably had your interactions with them in LNG modular homes.
Yeah, I mean, I think focusing on climate change, the government has really successfully promoted the take-up of electric vehicles by, incentivizing that, and I think doing something similar would really get the house builders' attention, and push them into providing PVs and electric vehicle charging points and heat pumps and more and better insulated homes from the start. Costs typically 3 to 5 times to retrofit something as it does to install it from the start, and that's where we've got to get focused, really getting the standard of our homes up from what we're building right now to the absolute point where we're at the edge of our capability, so we're not having to retrofit going forward.
Great. So interesting on the subsidization piece. Does anyone have any views on subsidization, can't say the word, or indeed taxation, or any other government initiative that should be taken forward? I think Tabitha, you're putting your hand up there.
So we still incentivize new builds over retrofit. 20% VAT on, you claim it back on new builds, you can't get it back on retrofit. Regulations, we're still not going down the fabric first, we're still building buildings that are no longer fit for purpose, and we're encouraging people to still do that. We talk about taking gas out of the, as one of the heating methods. They talk about hydrogen and carbon capture and storage, and all these things are almost like missing the main point. Let's get the regulation right to start with on building as with the minimum embodied carbon, the minimum operational, and for longevity.
Great, Jo.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good example of why I was like, profit, let's put profit first. We incentivize profit the wrong way. But for me, I think, well-formed legislation, I will stress a well-formed, because when it's ill-formed, it has the opposite effect. But government has the power to level the playing field. When I go back to it, at the moment, it's a competitive space. If it was law, then we wouldn't compete on it, and we would just do it. And I use safety as an example. This industry had an utterly atrocious safety record before it became law. Why? Because in order to make employees more safe, you had to spend more money on new processes and new kit, etc., and enforcing that and auditing it, etc., etc. And all of that ate into your profit margin. Wasn't law. So if you didn't have to do it, then we didn't do it. Then it became law. And the safety record of this industry went from being quite shocking to actually being one of the leading industries in terms of keeping people safe, especially when you consider some of the projects that we undertake and the scale of what we build. So government has the power to level the playing field and make it law, make sustainability something that we all have to do as part of our very license to operate. If you're not building a truly sustainable building, if you are not using the right materials, then your ability to put a shovel in the ground is not there.
Yeah, legislation is absolutely key, and it's forcing us to change in a way that we need to as quickly as we need to. Natasha.
Yep. So my point, I don't know if it's controversial, but my point is about offsetting. So net zero carbon is you balance your emitted carbon or your embodied carbon by amount of offsets that you buy, essentially a promise. So this means that if you emit a lot of carbon, you can just spend a lot of money, offset it, and there you go. You got your net zero carbon building. That's why offsetting is sometimes known as toff-setting. So I think that either the price of carbon or offsetting needs to be rethunk, or potentially you can only offset a certain quantity of total carbon. But I don't really know exactly what the answer is, but I really want to address offsetting.
I've got a good stat for you. The offsetting mechanism was brought to us by the same geniuses that created the dot-com bubble and the subprime mortgage crisis.
Oh, wonderful.
So it shows you how effective offsetting is going to be.
Loving the statistics coming out. Kayla, is there anything on this that you would like to address around sort of government's involvement?
Mainly that governments don't do enough, but we also shouldn't be waiting for them. And the panel have said all the good reasons that it does drive industry, but you can't morally wait for the government to tell you to do the right thing. That's very challenging. And I think the industry, COP26, it seems a bit distant. I mean, it doesn't seem part of the day-to-day life when you go to work on your building projects, but people need to be much more aware of the bubbling crisis that kind of the global political leaders are kind of acknowledging now. And the regulations will come quickly and punitively. And, you know, they will be hard. And if we don't gear up for the change now, businesses will suffer and they'll go bust because they're not prepared for those changes. So I think it's foolish to think that because government's been so lax historically, that they will continue to be so when the scale of the disasters that will start happening due to climate change will mandate them into action, and then you will get hard regulation. So I would look at things like the We Mean Business Coalition and other groups of business leaders who are advocating for change. And you know, I suppose you could talk to your own companies and say, what is your pledge? What are you doing? What do you know? And that comes back to the purpose issue. But like, what are we doing as a business? Is this a business I want to work for? Does your company align with your values? And you know, certainly you can be asking questions and say, I don't really want to work here. It's kind of a known statistic with young joiners to the workforce that people aren't sticking with companies that don't align with their purpose. And so I would encourage everyone to exercise that right, because you want to be on the right side of businesses in the future. We need businesses, but we need good businesses.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the pledge thing is really, really important, and important for everyone to commit to and be able to be a part of. So I'm just going to finish off with one last question. It's one of our top questions here. It's got one. Woohoo. Does more need to be done to introduce sustainability into education? And I'm going to take that as all routes of education, from primary, secondary through to tertiary and beyond. So actually, I would actually like to direct this back to considering the position that you hold at Cambridge. What's your view on this?
So I'm not necessarily sure that's true, and it depends what type of education. So I was telling the group a story. My friend with a 13-year-old said that her son is rabid at home. They must get an electric car. They have to stop using throwaway plastic. I mean, young children are pretty angry. They're getting a pretty good education about how we've screwed up the planet for them, and they're coming home and telling their parents what not to do in the house anymore. So, okay, like the 13 and under crowd, they're getting a pretty good education. I think we do have a problem in the deep disciplines. So, you know, architects, engineers, your first training is not to kill people. And that's really important, right? So we have to regulate and license and register people in a way that we're sure they're not going to kill people. But what we're not integrating, so this goes to the professions, RICS and RIBA and ICE and IStructE, they're not really integrating sustainability mindsets into their professional curriculums. And so I think, and they're not learning how to work with each other either. You know, you're on an architecture course, you're on an engineering course, you're on a real estate course. So there, I think it's failing. But like the courses we run are continuing education. And so I also think there's only so much you can learn in school, because work is different from school. And you have to go to work and be like, oh, it's all kind of different. There's all this stuff I didn't know. And I think we should be encouraging lifelong sustainability education, and not just CPD, not just like, you know, your half-day lunch break CPD, but proper continuing education for people to take all of the knowledge they've gained from now work. Like, oh, now I understand a lot about how this really works, but I need help and training for how to act.
just like to, actually, it's a great question to share a bit of wisdom, if I may. It's actually the first time I've looked out at an audience and felt very old. So I feel like I can share a bit of wisdom of something that I feel we don't teach enough of in education, you know, at all levels. You are about to enter a really exciting fight. But be under no illusion, it is a fight. And that does mean that as you go on this sustainability journey and you become the sustainability leaders of the future, you are going to have days which are utterly brilliant, and you're going to have days that are atrocious. There is no steady state. You are going to be up 1 minute and you're going to be down the next. You're going to wonder why you're doing this, and you'll be back up thinking that's why I do it. And then you're going to be back down thinking, why am I doing this? The best thing that you can do to enable this fight is to go away and think to yourselves, what is the one thing that I have in my life that makes me happy? Like really happy, that gives you that release, and invest your personal time, effort, and energy in that source of happiness, whatever it is, and cultivate it, because you're going to need it. And when you have the bad days, go to that source of happiness that gives you that boost, that stimulation that brings you back to the fight. Because our emerging crisis, particularly in this industry, is burnout of our sustainability leaders, of our youth, with the great ideas and with the fresh energy, because it is a tough fight. Me, I horse ride. I love it. Switch the phone off, gallop away. I literally gallop away from my problems, but it makes me feel fabulous. And then I come back to the fight. But we don't teach that part enough. You know, your resilience is as critical to building planetary resilience.
Great one. I really like that. And getting that headspace and perspective, I think, is so important. For me, perspective is particularly when I'm, say, hiking. I love going to big mountains in the Alps, for example, and going hiking. Absolutely love it. And you just kind of realize how small every problem you have is in relation to this absolutely huge mountain that you might be climbing at a particular time. And also getting back to nature, like absolutely love nature, everything about it, bit of a geek in that sense. But I think it's what you're passionate about should also help drive your professional lives as well. Any more on the education piece? Yes, Tabitha?
So I tend to work across the built environment discipline. So with the architecture, with the engineering, with the architectural technologists, with the landscape architects and the quantity surveyors. The JBM with the engineers have just brought in sustainability. So obviously I work for timber industry. Timber was never encouraged to really be taught. People could leave university only maybe having done 2 hours about timber as a material. That is now beginning to change. Architecture with the ARB, they've been building in, and the whole new sustainability needs to come in this year. Then they will also be looking at fire. Things are so beginning to change, but it's the breakdown in these silos. Go and work. Yeah, we can't get the professions. They're not going to be working together. That it's their job to stay apart. I talk to people within the concrete industry and the steel industry. I'm saying, look, can't we just work? You know, all buildings are hybrid. Let's use the minimum amount of material and the right material for the job. Let's talk. And it's like, well, yeah, I agree with you personally, but professionally, I'd lose my job if I say that. And I'm just going, this is absolutely crazy. I mean, we run multidisciplinary competitions to bring all the disciplines together. And that's what it's with Natasha on it. And it's so powerful to see, going back to the communication point, how you learn to speak to each other, to actually understand where you're coming from. I'm not an architect, I'm not an engineer, but I know somebody who knows somebody, and it's always going out and asking those people. So education is changing. It's not changing fast enough. I mean, the lecturers, have a really tough job to do, and how do they upskill to actually impart that knowledge? But it is changing.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to close it there. Thank you to everyone in attendance today. Thank you to everyone online. Thank you so much to all our speakers. That panel discussion was really great. I've taken so many notes. And what I would ask everyone in the room to do and everyone at home to do, if you have taken notes or if you're very good at remembering all of these things and these things come to the forefront, take 3 things from today that have most stuck in your mind and think about how you can actually do that in your day-to-day jobs and even at home. I've got 3 things here. I've got make a pledge. So make a pledge around what I'm going to do differently. whether that is in my professional life or, somewhere else. Influence others. So let's start influencing others about the conversation that there is to be had. Think about how we do that positively. We're not talking about the earth being on fire here, as Joe said earlier. It's actually the bigger picture around that. And lastly, communicate better, which is definitely from Kayla's point around there's influence as well, but communication for me is so important and pivotal to how I do my job. If I could not communicate with people, I'm not quite sure where I'd be today, to be honest. Probably in a cave somewhere. I'm not quite sure. But doing that better, because you can always do it better, is so important. And for me, it's also then about listening. So if you are communicating with people around you, you are collaborating with other people in your industry, how can you listen to what they have to say and take that on board? So 3 things from today, which I think will be great to take away, and then hopefully we can make some sort of difference. Thank you very much. And thank you to Rosie and Vitotas for joining online. I think that actually worked quite well. So thank you very much again. We do have drinks afterwards for those that would like to come for some drinks. We are going to All Bar One on New Oxford Street. Please do join us for some beverages. There is a tab, but I didn't say that. See you there.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.